Well, it's about that time. It's time for another Q&A video. Let's jump right into it because my storage space is already low as it is. From Laurent Chartier, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. As a rather new writer myself in the fanfiction department, I wonder, what advice would you give to other Star Wars writers out there who are new in the field? So it kind of depends on, what kind of advice you're looking for. I'd say my best overall advice is, for as much as we love like all the big, grandiose, amazing stuff in Star Wars, the lightsaber duels, the space battles, the explosions, all the force powers, always remember when you're writing, whether it's your own story or a story set in the Star Wars universe, fan fiction, whatever, always remember the characters need to come first. Those action scenes don't mean really anything if you aren't invested in the characters. It's part of why when I was writing Cassius, my main concern was trying to make the characters relatable, or at the very least, likable to the reader, so that when those big moments came, you felt something. You were invested in the story. I'd say focus just as much on the smaller, more subtle elements. The scenes between characters, like what do these characters feel about each other? What are they going through? Like, how can you convey that in an interesting way to the reader? I'd say that's probably the best advice I can give to any writers out there. Is half of what makes your story great is all in the characters and how they interact off of each other. You could have look at the play Waiting for Godot. It's set in one spot. It's all about two guys waiting for someone who never shows up. But what keeps you invested is these two characters and their relationship with each other and how they work off of each other. You can have a story set in a single location with really nothing going on, and if the characters are interesting enough, it'll keep the interest of the reader or the audience. So I'd say best advice, focus on the characters and their interactions. That should be your main focus when writing a story. Thank you very much for the question. From Milkman McGee, outside of Star Wars, who are some of your favorite authors? And have any of them inspired your writing style or how you approach character interactions? P.S. Love the amazing content. Thank you very much. So, my favorite author of all time is J.R.R. Tolkien, the author of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, Silmarillion, all of the Middle-earth lore. I just love how detailed and textured and layered his works are. Just he could take one element of a book, like he could write about a rock that's found on the bank of a river and turn it into 3 paragraphs about what this rock means to the characters who find it. Outside of that, I did love the Harry Potter books a lot growing up. I still enjoy them. J.K. Rowling. I really like, how what really strikes me about Rowling with her writing is, again, the characters and how they work off of each other. All the characters in Harry Potter, even though I knew they were fictional, felt very real. And at times, even the death scenes, in those books, because they rack up towards the end. They made me, feel emotional, and that's what you want as an author. Outside of Peter Benchley, had a few books that I read when I was younger in school. I read the novelization of Jaws, and I liked a lot of his stuff. Outside of that, there aren't a ton who come to mind right out of the gate. But so I guess in terms of did any of them have an influence or an inspiration on my writing style? I'd say Tolkien, in the sense that there are times when I'm writing Cassius or whatever, I really like to take small elements at times and really dive into them, things that may not seem important at the time, but really flesh out what's going on with it and how it's affecting the story as a whole. Thank you very much, Milkman McGee, for your question. From 212th Trooper, are there any other series or franchises that you might do what ifs or fan fictions for? I know this is another question, and I wouldn't be surprised if you limited the amount of someone who can ask during a Q&A. So you have another question. I'll answer both of them. Any other series or franchise you might like to do what ifs for or fan fictions for? So that's a tough question. I'd probably want to make another channel if I was going to do what ifs or fan fictions for other series. The only big ones I could think of maybe doing what ifs for would be Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And I think, Harry Potter, maybe. Lord of the Rings would be incredibly difficult to do because the thing about Lord of the Rings is the story is so tightly wound together and so intricately woven that removing or changing even one element could set a chain reaction where the rest of the story, wouldn't work as a whole. And there's a lot of stories like that, and those are some of the best stories, is stories where every element works perfectly, where you can't really change much, or the story as a whole doesn't happen or it doesn't work. It's a possibility. In the future, I might. I'd like to continue focusing on Concordia Jedi first. The channel is growing every day, and before I branch off into other channels, I want to make sure that I've put enough time and focus here into this channel. Thank you very much, 212th Trooper. From Diamond 360, which of the Cassius books was your favorite to write? Which one was the most impactful for you? And what are you most excited about in Cassius' future? So I'd say I'll start with which one was the most impactful for me to write. And that would definitely be Cassius Nightfall, the one that takes place during Revenge of the Sith. And I say that because, for those of you who haven't read Cassius Nightfall, I'd say just kind of skip ahead or plug your ears for a bit. It was mainly because I had already written 3 books, one of them having, multiple parts and 20 chapters in all. And I'd really grown attached to these characters that I was writing about. And, many of them were killed off in this book, obviously, because Order 66 happens. And it was really the kind of turning point where I knew we're moving out of the era of, the civilized era of the Republic, and now moving into the dark and oppressive reign of the Empire. And this was the major turning point. And this, I felt, I had this kind of guttural feeling of, oh man, this is it. Things are really changing now. Like, nothing's gonna be able to go back to the way it was. As for which book was my favorite to write, I would definitely say Cassius Jedi Exile. Jedi Exile, I feel like, was the first time where I was really able to dive deep into, the psychology of the character of Cassius. And it was the first time we were really seeing just how much everything he's gone through has affected him. We get a little bit of it in The Inner Storm, but so much of it is, hidden under a layer of Cassius' desire for revenge against Vader. In Jedi Exile, there's nothing he can do at this point. All he can do is hide and stay alive. And so we spend a lot of time... Jedi Exile, I like to feel, is more of a character study of Cassius than a straight-up Star Wars story. There's so much that happens, and yet so little that happens. It's not a grandiose book, but there's so much character in it, I feel, at least in my opinion. I don't know how the other readers feel. From what I've seen from the community polls, most people's favorite Cassius book is the first book, Jedi Apprentice. But my favorite to write was Jedi Exile, just because I loved being able to finally have a little bit of breathing room and being able to dive into these different characters and how they're all coming together to form this narrative and build on the character of Cassius. As for what I'm most excited about in Cassius' future, I can't give too much away, but I will say there is more coming after this, after Cassius Jedi Master, and I think you guys are really, really going to like what I have planned going forward. Thank you very much for your question. From Enville23. Are you going to do more what-ifs on a regular schedule? Seriously, your what-if about Vader surviving Return of the Jedi was great. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, so I've said this many times before. The what-ifs are the hardest videos to do with the way I currently do what-ifs. If I wanted to, I could, forego the voice actors and just do the voices myself, or cut out character dialogue entirely, and I could probably put out a what if every week or every 2 weeks. But the problem with that is there's so many other channels that do these Star Wars what ifs, and I don't just want to be another, oh look, here's a what if scenario that was covered 12 times already. I want my what ifs to be something that are, for lack of a better word, I want them to stand out amongst the other what ifs, and that's why I bring in different voice actors. I try to tell unique stories that maybe other people haven't considered yet, and because I bring in voice actors and because they take time to write, and I do all my recording, editing, and publishing directly from my phone, all of these things, they take time, and that's not even considering the times where I just want to take a break from the what ifs to focus on my other stuff like Cassius, or my my editorial videos, or even just work and family. So there will be more what ifs. Like, I know that they are very spaced out on my channel. If you were looking for a fix for what ifs, go check out Star Wars Elseworlds. He makes really, really good what ifs. And Penti Patrol Star Wars. If you're looking for a constant stream of quality what ifs, like he's the guy to go to. He puts out a what if almost every day, and they're usually around an hour in length. Like, I don't know how he does it. The guy's amazing. Thank you very much for your question, Enville23. What If Vader Survived Return of the Jedi Part 2 is about halfway through being written. Once it's written, I'm going to pass it by Elseworlds and a few other friends of mine, and just make sure the story is up to par, make sure there's no major errors or any omissions. And after that, I can send out the lines to the voice actors I have. I can record everything, put it all together, and then it's just a matter of editing. Thank you very much for your question. From Tim McClemon. Do you ever experience writer's block? And if so, how do you mitigate it? Yes, writer's block is the absolute worst, especially for me, because I never like there being huge gaps in time between my uploads. Unless I announce that I'm taking a short break, like if it's a holiday or if I've got family in town or whatever. But recently I was dealing with writer's block for What If Vader Survived Return of the Jedi Part 2. I can't go into what caused the writer's block or in terms of the story. But the way I got through it was just kind of taking a break, stepping back, and thinking about what would make sense for this portion of the story, and just kind of slowly trying to draw the different pieces together, looking at different options, and seeing which ones would fit together best. Another thing that helps is just kind of focusing on other projects. Like, I took a break from writing the What If Vader Survived to focus on Cassius, and while writing out Cassius, and new ideas started popping into my head for the what ifs. And so that's kind of how I mitigate it. Is just it given enough time, it tends to work itself out. But another way I also mitigate it is just kind of chilling out, listening to a little music, just kind of letting my mind unravel into different scenarios. Thank you very much. 212 Trooper again. What would Cassius think of Ahsoka's fight with Vader and Ahsoka in general? I think Cassius would think of Ahsoka. He mentions Ahsoka once briefly in Nightfall. Mentions that she was, kicked out by the council, essentially, that they kind of screwed her over. But Cassius and Ahsoka, I don't believe would have ever met during the era of the Republic or the prequels. I think if they did meet, I think Cassius would, find her very interesting. He would certainly have a lot of questions for her about Anakin. But if they were speaking, say, after Anakin's fall to the dark side and after everything, I think he would be a bit more hesitant talking to her. I not that he dislikes her or anything, but there would be this question in his mind of, like, should he tell her, like, the truth about who Vader is? Of course, if this is after her duel with Vader, it would mainly be a question of like, how would these two characters, be able to help each other through their shared common pain? Ahsoka, her master is now Darth Vader. Anakin, or Cassius, lost everything to Anakin. So I think there would be a very civil camaraderie between the two, if that makes any sense. Thank you very much for your question. As for what he would think of the fight, he would say it was the shit. No. I think he would definitely be impressed that someone like Ahsoka would be able to hold her own against Anakin. Excuse me. Richard Winter asks, when did you see Star Wars for the first time? I saw it for the first time in 1989 at the age of 4. I can't remember the first time I saw Star Wars. I remember the earliest time that I can remember seeing it on a big screen. I talked about it in an older video I did, talking about my retrospective of Star Wars and the series and the franchise as a whole, my experience as a fan. But I remember watching it, and I was probably about 4 or 5. This was the early 2000s, and like maybe even late 90s. I remember just loving it. So that was about the first time I saw it. But thank you very much for your question. From Lucas Kersher, I believe. If that's not your name, again, I'm sorry. What was the thing that got you into Star Wars? The thing that got me into Star Wars was, again, probably seeing A New Hope for the first time. Or at least the first time I remember seeing it. And the toys that my brothers had at the time, the Super Nintendo Star Wars games, those certainly helped. Thank you very much for your question. Deb the Second asks, what are your thoughts about the Revenge of the Sith video game? I loved the Revenge of the Sith video game. I had the DS version and the PS2 version. The DS version was a lot of fun, but being a side scroller and on the DS, it was a little more limited. And especially if you were playing the Game Boy Advance version, that was even more limited. But for the PS2 version, I think what the game lacks in the actual story missions, where it's like the linear missions where you have to go around completing objectives, I think what it lacks there, because I do think it's a little bit lacking by today's standards, it more than makes up for in a dueling mode that more than stands up today. The dueling mode in the Revenge of the Sith PS2 game was absolute fire, and I think it's still probably the best dueling mode in any Star Wars game I've seen. Thank you very much for your question. Noah Stewart asks, your thoughts on the Kenobi series, and should Starkiller come to canon? Your thoughts. I gave my thoughts on the Kenobi series. I think it wasn't perfect. I had some issues with it, but the cons were not enough to outweigh the pros for me. I thought it was a very good series in my mind. I know a lot of people disagree. That's fine. We're all allowed to have our opinions. And I'd say, overall, I'd give it a solid B+, A-. I think it was just great seeing Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen back again. There were so many great scenes, so many great moments. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Should Starkiller come to canon? I talked about this, I believe, in the previous Q&A we did. While I think it would be cool to see Starkiller come back into canon, I don't think you could do it in a way that would please fans of the original video games and the expanded universe, because there's no way you could bring Starkiller into canon and make him Vader's apprentice or have him be as powerful as he is in the video game. And that was one of the main appealing factors of Starkiller, was how powerful he was, and you could go absolute god mode. and you just couldn't do that with Starkiller in canon. It would kind of break the universe in a way. Because obviously in the video game you take on Vader and you take on Palpatine, and so there would have to be a question of like, well, why doesn't this guy just do everything? And with the current canon going on, there's not a lot of ways they could adapt the story faithfully and fit it into canon without retconning a whole ton of stuff. So I think it would be cool, like maybe bring him back as like an Inquisitor or something. But again, I don't think there's a way they could do it that would please fans of the original game. Thank you very much. And now our final question here comes from Clone Chronicles official channel. Hi, Crane Clank. How are you doing? He says, when is Vader Survived Return of the Jedi Part? Yeah, I know. It's coming. I will put a barrel at the back of your head. No. He says, what I mean to say is, what inspired you to do YouTube? So, with Concordia Jedi, it was when the channel first started, it was mainly just a place for Thomas and I to post videos of us fighting with our lightsabers, and every once in a while do a video talking about something related to Star Wars. But over time, I had more ideas, more stories, and more things that I wanted to do, and I felt YouTube would probably be a good place to put everything up. Anything that I wanted to talk about related to Star Wars. And so I started doing more and more. I started putting up some what if videos. I started doing more impressions. I started kind of reaching out to a few other channels, like sharing some of my videos with them. What really hit it off, or made the channel grow bigger, like what got us to 1,000 subscribers in the first place, was the what if Yoda went to fight Grievous in Revenge of the Sith. Like, that video ended up blowing up over the course of a year, and within a year of that being uploaded, we got over 1,000 subscribers. And from there, things started picking up very slowly. And then things really blew up once I did What If Vader Survived Return of the Jedi. Elseworlds, shared it on his channel. He left a really great comment. Subscribed to the channel. He was great. And from that little boost, we got another couple thousand subscribers. And ever since then, we've just been going more and more. Cassius has helped a lot too. I've been getting a lot of support with that series. It's all really been kind of surreal, because when we started this channel, we didn't think we would get even 100 subscribers. It was just kind of a way for us to find a space to put our lightsaber duel videos and watch them every now and again. Hey, look at that. Remember when we did that? So we didn't think it was going to grow this big, and we are so thankful that it did. Thank you very much for your question. But for the question of what got us into YouTube, it was mainly just, becoming a part of the community. Talking about Star Wars, sharing our ideas and our viewpoints, our opinions. It's just been great. So again, thank you for your question. I think that'll do it for this Q&A. If you guys want to leave your questions for another Q&A in the future, you can in the comments, or I'll create another community tab. Thank you guys so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.